really struggling with it because I'm living in that place. How somebody shows love versus how somebody receives love are different.
Love is messy. Where the real love is the discernment of choosing whether or not to continue to love that person.
It's hurting me more. I didn't like myself in that place. Clearly, I was behaving in a way that didn't feel like truly me also. So why was I doing that to myself?
Love doesn't always mean yes.
Or what do I want for her and for us?
What do you want for you though, Zachary?
Getting back to Simply Enough, in such a weird way, I kind of love myself a little bit more. I am so clear now in how I want to show up.
It's so important in the Simply Enough and coming back to yourself and how you can show up to others as your best and favorite self. Well, that's self-checking. What is it that I want?
I understand the terms. I'm sad that the terms are the terms, but I'm also not going to compromise.
Sometimes a person has to get to a point of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. You can't give what you don't have. So love yourself, and that's how you can give away love.
Welcome to Simply Enough. This is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Linnert.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio.
You know, Dr. Ignacio, I have to come clean. Last week's episode has really been sitting with me. First of all, I loved it. And for you listeners and viewers that are just joining us for the first time, we really jumped into the idea of love and tried to move away from the goal of romantic love and to see the other beautiful and rich opportunities for love between friends and love within family members that exist out there. And
the value of them, the value
mm-hmm.
of different types of love, because there tends to be such a value as if it's the only thing
mm-hmm.
that's important is romantic love. And when will, my prince or my queen find me? And it's not all about romantic love.
Yeah. And you shared so beautifully this trip that you went on and all of these moments of love that existed on this trip between you and some girlfriends and then mentors. And you really gave us a springboard for just a rich discussion. And I want to come back to what you shared because I feel like I want to dig in a little bit more into it. And so without, resharing all of the episode from last week, you talked about this moment between your college girlfriends and you, and they really stepped out into a place of vulnerability to share their love for you in a way that you said saved you, like literally saved your life. And it was such an emotional story, and it was so beautiful that you were willing to go there with us. And it truly, I think, captured this idea of, like you said, the value that can happen when love exists among friends. The reason why I want to dig into it a little bit more is because I just kept thinking after that episode that I wanted to talk more about love being an action, love being a verb. Love is something you participate in. And I want to use a personal story to jump off in this case, because as we got towards the end of the episode and we were sharing about how somebody wants to share love and then we need to receive it, right? I think in the story that I'm going to share, how I want to show love and how somebody wants to receive love, there can be a crossroads there, and there can be a little bit of a difference of understanding. And then I wonder what that means for what active love looks like. So let me just share. My mom, God bless her, has been really battling with a lot of chronic pain for many, many years. After quite a few tests and things, she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which, as a doctor, maybe because I'm still learning, maybe you can just help us real quick understand like what fibromyalgia as a category just means in general.
So fibromyalgia is a chronic pain syndrome. And truth be told, it's our understanding of it is developing and improving, but there's still a lot of unknown to it, in that it is primarily a diagnosis of exclusion. meaning other things, other
Mhm.
causes for this kind of global chronic non-specific, non-focal pain, they've been ruled out. And so it's been likened to or akin to other diagnoses that kind of just fall in a spectrum, like, chronic fatigue. And I say those words, those diagnoses with a little bit of a caution, because many physicians and healthcare providers kind of dump and lump those pain disorders almost by throwing their hands up in the air
Mhm.
and just kind of thinking it's not real, or it's made
Mhm.
up, or it's all in the patient's head, and it's not.
Mhm.
It's more so the shortcomings, or not even shortcomings to put any blame, but just the lack of research
Mhm.
and scientific explanation. But just because it can't be explained yet doesn't remove its validity, and doesn't mean it's not real. It's just not completely understood yet.
Thank
Is
you
that
so much.
fair? Like,
It's totally fair. And thank you for setting it up that way, because I think that will also help as as I'm sharing this story, and then we're building off of that for this episode, really truly understanding that this is more about how my mom wants to be loved, how I want to show my love as it comes out because of the chronic pain that she's dealing with. Okay. So thank you for setting that up, because I would be disappointed if at all this feels like I'm judging my mom's pain, which is not at all what I'm doing. Okay.
mhm,
So she had been dealing with chronic pain and going through, as you had mentioned, all the tests to rule things out. There was one year when I think most of my family members hit a tipping point and just thought, you can get yourself better. Like, you just need to do X, you just need to do Y, as if we could really understand what it's like for the person, my mom in this case, to be battling what she's battling. And my mom very, very bluntly said, you don't know what it's like for me. And that really, that hit me hard, because she's absolutely right. And I thought, okay, well, I can't know like physically what it's like, but I can do everything else that I can. I can read studies. I can try to talk to others. I can try to talk to medical professionals. I can talk to her, and I can engage in these actions to demonstrate I'm with you, or I'm
mhm,
that we are here to support you. I'm here to support you, and that my love for you means that I'm going to be active. I'm going to read. I'm going to listen. I'm going to talk. I'm going to ask. Right. I'm going to do all these things. And what I found, or what I'm finding, is that in some ways, the way that I want to show love to my mom by being an active member of her chronic pain, her fibromyalgia, is different than what she wants. We are at a crossroads, because, in my research, and please correct me if I have some misunderstandings here, but in my research, came to understand, because fibromyalgia is such a difficult and diagnosis to kind of come up with blanket statements when many cases are so unique. The couple things that I did come away with was that exercise, a strong mental health program, and diet are really three things that a person that's battling fibromyalgia can really have under their control.
yes.
When they have so many other chronic things that they're dealing with, those are things that they can't control. So I pushed as I can with all the love in my heart, to share what I read with my mom, and to say, look, not only do I love you, right, but I heard you. And so these are things that I found, that a commitment to, some kind of physical activities frequently that get the heart rate up can be beneficial. And talking to a mental health professional can be beneficial. And watching your diet and how you pay attention to your diet can also be helpful. And that just wasn't the way my mom wants to receive love in this case. And it got me thinking about your story, because you were open, at least now that you were open to hearing what your girlfriends had said to you. And they gave you some very, very direct, very strong feedback. And you were open and you heard them. And the way that you were open to receiving love, and the way that they were actively demonstrating it and leaning into it, was a success in that regard. I'm struggling I'm struggling in my relationship with my mom because of the way that I want to show love and the way that she wants to receive it. And so that's why I've been wrestling with last week's episode as we look at another example where love is an action and also receiving love can really conflict.
May I ask,
Yes.
what is your sense of how your mom wants to receive love?
So let me say I don't know what it's like to live with the chronic pain. So I will say that. I will also say that I don't know what it's like for her to get over the difficulties of walking more or exercising more, or when she's been not as active prior. She has made it clear that she does not want me to talk about a commitment towards physical fitness or changes to her diet or conversations with mental health professionals. That really my job is to love her and let her be. Love her and let her do what she wants to do with her life. And she has said, why can't we just love each other as we are? And for her, love means just letting the other person be. And that's what she's actually said to me. So that's how I would answer that question.
Why is her answer something you're struggling with? So, because the flip side to her not receiving the way you give your love,
Mm-hmm.
and this is kind of reminiscent of, for our listeners and our viewers, that book, The Five Love Languages.
Yeah, yes. Yes.
Right? The five love languages are acts of service,
Mm-hmm.
words of affirmation, gifts themselves, as in
Mm-hmm.
like objects, physical touch,
Mm-hmm.
and time.
Yep. That's right.
And people have different languages of love in how they give, and because that's how they perceive love in giving, that's also how they value love in how and what they receive. There's no question that you are coming from a place of love, and that is your love language, is the act of service, meaning that you're delving in, you're reading more, learning more, and you're actively wanting to engage with her because of your love for her, and she is not receiving that well. How she wants to receive love is to just be loved as she is, without advice, counsel, and that kind of thing. So in her telling you, Zachary, that is not how I want to be loved, let me be, and that's how you love me, is letting me be. What is it about that is difficult for you to either see, perceive, or receive?
And that speaks to exactly why I've been wrestling with last week's episode, because
Yeah.
I truly believe to my core that love is active, and love is kindness. Love is a willingness to take a risk and to have the moment where you say, look, this is what I'm seeing, and because I love you so much, I'm willing to say what I'm seeing, even if that hurts your feelings, even if that upsets you, even if that pushes you away. That I am so called and pulled by my love for you that I ultimately want what I think is best, or what I feel might be best for you. And that is so strong. The feeling is so overwhelming that I have to do something. I have to engage. I am pulled in that direction. And what she's asking just runs completely counter to the way that I see love, which is why I'm struggling. Because I'm like, this is how you raised us. Like, this is, I think this is how I was raised as a child, was when you love with your whole heart, and you love with your whole mind. And that means that you go and you do and you act, and that there's momentum and progress and drive and pull behind that, and it's not just static. And I think that's why it's really struggling, and I'm really struggling with it, because I'm living in that place, specifically sparked by your story, of seeing a moment when how somebody shows love versus how somebody receives love are different.
So one thing I'm going to ask is, in your doing your research, and then helping her from a place of love, because that is how you show love,
Yeah.
is with these acts of service. Is she receiving it as that you're telling her what to do?
Yes.
Okay. And it is human nature and I know this as a doctor, I know this as a mother to teenage children, and then admittedly, I know myself as a stubborn, bullheaded, independent woman. People don't like to be told what to do, right? And so immediately, actually, it's not uncommon to immediately take on the role of defensiveness,
Mhm.
so as to not have to be told what to do or feel that they themselves are weak or ashamed because
Mhm.
they have to be told what to do, as opposed to if it's their own idea, or if they
Right.
feel that it's their own idea. And people won't change until they want to change anyway. And not that it's here that your ultimate desire is to change your mom per se. You are coming from a place of love because you are, concerned for her. So I'm going to ask, have you peeled your love back a little bit to a deeper layer of, yes, you're coming from love, but what is it that you're ultimately feeling? Because love feels better to feel, or love feels more honorable to come from a place of
Mhm.
love, right? What is it that is fueling these acts of love? And I mention that because what I think might be the case, and I'm curious if you've articulated it, is fear. Obviously, worry, but
Mhm.
you strip the worry even a little bit deeper, and then there's fear. And we do things and we think things um, out of desperation when we are fearful. My friends, when they had their intervention about my eating disorder,
Yeah.
the thing that struck me the most were not their words and not their advice of, like, have you seen a
Mhm.
nutritionist for
Yep.
about eating disorders, or stating objective facts. It wasn't the facts. The thing that actually moved me was my friend being so moved by the moment herself and wanting to express her love. She cried, and in her crying, that's when she revealed her fear for me. And that's actually what hit home. um, and so while your acts of service are your language of love, I'm curious if you've articulated everything about where you're coming from, this place of love. Does that make sense?
It does. I would say I have. And usually what I say in response is two things. One, it definitely comes from a place of fear. And also to see somebody that you love in such pain and wanting that pain to end for them. I don't know if that's fear necessarily, but my heart hurts right when I see somebody that I love also hurting, and
Mhm.
not knowing what that's like for them. When I do talk to her about her situation and whatever studies I've read or whatever it is that I'm coming into the conversation with, I usually come from that perspective, which is, it breaks my heart to see you dealing with such pain. I worry for you, right? And
Mhm.
I fear that I won't get as much time with you, or I
Mhm.
fear for you and what your health will be like going forward, and for my nieces and nephews, your grandchildren, and your friends. And so yes, that it comes from an emotional place for sure.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I think sometimes maybe I forget that message a little bit because I come in like, I've read, like my little student with my glasses on. Oh, I've read this study, and this is the solution, as if that's the case. But no, there are a number of times that I've articulated truly just how hard it is to see somebody you love struggle,
Mhm.
and how I am afraid. I am afraid of what, if her pain is like now, what it's going to be like later, and etc. So yeah, I have said, and also reflected with myself what it is I'm thinking or feeling in response.
Mhm. I'm curious. So when you say, I'm not coming from a place of telling you what to do you understand that as your son who loves you very much, I'm worried for you and it
Mm-hmm.
scares me. I'm curious, what does she say, if I may ask? How does she receive that, and what's usually her either response or, dare I say, retort? Having never met your
Yeah.
mom, so I don't
Yeah.
mean to project.
Um, I also, let me just put in there, thank you so much for letting me use this. Listeners, thank you for going on this journey with us, because as you can tell, I'm really in this based on last week's episode, and I'm really in it because I think so many ideas were sparked about love and true love. Now, in this case, it's mother and son, right?
Mhm.
Son and mother, not friend. But um, you know what happens kind of at that those crossroads, like you see, like even right now, you can tell I'm in my head about all of this. So I just thank you, Dr. Ignacio, and thank you, listeners, for going on this journey with me, looking at a very specific example of what love looks like in real time, in real form, with its
Mhm.
boots on, and that it's, it's complicated. So I would say that when I have come from a more emotional approach, the response doesn't, the response is there's a connection for a second, and then it immediately becomes, but I still get to do what I want to do.
Mhm.
That's great. Thank you. That warms my heart, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm doing what the doctors say. I'm doing all the things that I can do. So that like connection, that moment of really relating to each other on an emotional level is there, and but then it's brief.
When she says, um I imagine this has come up multiple times because fibromyalgia is chronic. So when you come in, eager beaver, with all of these studies and this advice, and she reflects back to you, no, just love me as I am, how does that make you feel?
Mhm.
To our listeners and our viewers, um, in case you're wondering, like, this is exactly what coaching
Mhm.
looks like and sounds like, which is the answers really are in Zachary. So it's not like to give advice or anything. It's to actually ask questions, and you're really truly coaching yourself. I just happen to be asking questions.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you for letting us go in this direction today. So before I answer your question, I will also say that because we talked about being a loving being, and this is somebody that I love and I will always love. Even doing this episode to me is an act of love, and having this conversation come up demonstrates that I'm still all in with my mom. Now,
Mhm.
that all in has changed. Now, getting back to your question, I recognize that the ways in which I show love, my acts of service, and also quality time, because part of it was I will exercise with you, or I will go on a meal plan with you. I will be with you if I can't be there physically, but if I can be there remotely, I can do these things with you, and then we can talk afterwards, or we can, there was at least some kind of offer on my part beyond just acts of service, more like quality time and etc. It's clear that we're at an impasse, and
Mm.
it hurts. And I would be lying if I didn't say I wasn't sad about it. But I also recognize that it's okay. I need to adjust. No, not I need to. I want to adjust how I engage and show love to her. Now, in some ways, the little like just person in me that's like, but then, she still gets her win, so to speak, because then you just kind of like let her go and be herself. And that's actually true. I realize it's hurting me more if I'm coming into the conversation again, and again and again. And I'm showing up in the way that I know to show up when I truly love somebody, and we're just not getting anywhere. Now it's on me to make the change. Now it's on me to say, okay, I will show up full heart, full mind, full love. I just will show up differently, and then protect myself, or I don't want to say put up boundaries, but now I just have a nuanced understanding of how we're going to engage with each other and how I'm going to engage with her. It's sad. I would be lying a little bit if I didn't say that there are times that I do get a little pissed about where we are, but then there's a peace about it too. And I find a centeredness, and also getting back to simply enough, in such a weird way, I kind of love myself a little bit more because I am so clear now in how I want to show up, that if I'm asked not to, okay, that doesn't mean I'm not going to show up for other people in the same way. I understand the terms. I'm sad that the terms are the terms, but I'm also not going to compromise. So it's this weird flow where there's this kind of sadness, loss, grieving coupled by this like peace and wisdom and also just pride in kind of an odd way.
Mhm. Let me corroborate with that, in that, and it does come back to simply enough, because simply enough and the me that's in our sign,
Mhm.
simply enough, is a ultimately a charge of, you know yourself, and you develop yourself for you to be your favorite self, because that's all we have agency over, we all have
Mhm.
control over, is the me, is the I. So I'm going to ask you this question: what more could you possibly do,
Yeah.
Zachary, anyway?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so
Mhm.
having said that, you do have pride, and you pat yourself on the back, in that there's really not much more that you can
Mhm.
do. You exercise for her. I know you
Right.
wanted to spend time with her and offer to exercise with her, and that's wonderful, but you cannot exercise
Right.
for her. You cannot take her medicine for
Right.
her. You cannot be the motivation for her. The motivation comes within, and I'm not blaming or shaming your mom
Right.
either, but I'm just saying, what more can you do? If you have done all that you can for another, what is there to be, sad or ashamed about yourself for having done that? And then there comes a point when there is no more that you can do, because you've done what you could,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
We do also have a saying in medicine, and especially in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine, so much of one's a patient's outcome is so much dependent on the person, not on the surgeon, the diagnosis or anything like that. And again, I'm not victim blaming your mom, but
Right.
there's a saying that we say in terms of, full recovery, or even beginning the road to recovery, which is, sometimes a person has to get to a point of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that only comes from the person. And so you can't blame her, shame her, motivate her, inspire her to that point. That all comes from within. And you have provided what you can out of love for her. So there's that. So that's my question, and you answered that question, which is, what more can you do? You cannot swallow her pills for her. You cannot exercise for her. Okay. Then the next question that I have is, ultimately, what do you want with your mom? And what I mean by that is, so my childhood upbringing, uh, immigrant, like we've talked about in many episodes, immigrant Filipina. I am a daughter, and that means something for those who might know Filipino culture. So you have to be the good girl and the well-behaved and all that kind of stuff, and very much in a strict, conservative, disciplined
Mhm.
um, upbringing. Well, when I had kids, and I'm so grateful that, though they also had daycare, there were times that I, could have my parents watch our kids if, I
Mhm.
had to be at
Mhm.
work, or it was the weekend and there was no daycare, and I'm so grateful for that. But I did also watch the dynamic between,
Mhm.
my parents and my kids, and it's so funny because, I mean, my parents, like, my kids had them wrapped around their little
Yeah.
fingers. And so they very much spoiled the kids, but there also was still, and I understand that, necessarily so, in terms of, there's still also a lot of like old school discipline. And I remember a conversation, a lighthearted conversation, but I told my parents, grandparents' prerogative is for you to spoil the grandkids and leave the discipline a little bit, leave the discipline, to us, and you
Mhm.
just enjoy
Mhm.
your time with the grandkids, because who and how do you want to be with the grandkids? What relationship do you want to have with them? Do you want to be the disciplinarian, or do you want to have a loving and, dare I say, spoiling relationship? And not that it has to be either or, but
Right.
for the sake of the argument, let's make it either or. Do you want to be the disciplinarian grandparent, where the grandchild is afraid of you? Or do you want to be, because it's your prerogative as a grandparent, because it's a different role than parenting. Do you want to be the disciplinarian, or do you want to be the loving, spoiling
Mm-hmm.
grandparents that the kids want to go to? I'll even make a stretch of even talking about, my faith and religion. We were having a conversation in the operating room, and one of my OR nurses loves the relationship that she sees and hears about myself with my kids. And so she often like kind of brings up her kids and asks questions of, how would I do this in this situation? And she was talking about how her son, I guess, didn't show up for confession, and she was like appalled by that he didn't show up for and this kid's like whatever, 9 years old at the time, but didn't show up for confession. And she was kind of chastising him, and then made him go back to the priest. And there was a lot of, shame about the fact that he didn't go to confession. And so, and I get the idea of penance and everything, but like, it was just very heavy handed in her description.
Yeah.
I said, I totally get it. I'm not Filipino Catholic, but I am Filipino with a lot of, I'm well versed in the Filipino Catholic guilt. And I said, so I get where you're coming from, but is that how you want your son to see God? Do you want your son to see God as punishing and a God to be feared? Or do you want to see God? Do you want your child to have a loving relationship, and where your child feels safe to go to God and feels unconditionally loved by God? That's a long diatribe. Forgive me for that tangent, but that's where I'm just trying to ask you, what do you want with your mom? What kind of relationship do you want with your mom? Do you want to be the parenting child to your mom, or do you want to have some sort of loving relationship? The great news there is you get to choose. So you do have agency and autonomy in that choice. And therefore it's not like all right, well, if I'm not going to say anything, she won, but okay,
Right.
begrudgingly, I'll let her. No, you get to have that choice, and choice is an action, right? So it's a loving action of what kind of relationship do you want to have with your mom? And from that place, you can still have your love language of acts of service, but this time it'll be like, okay, my act of service is I'm not going to have the parenting role, but I'm going to have the act of service of like, hey, mom, want to watch a movie with me? And I'm going to bring this movie, and it has nothing to do with, her health or anything like that. But that is part of your active choice of the relationship that you choose to have with your mom.
Such a great question. And I will also say the beautiful thing about that question is that my answer has changed and evolved, because I'm willing to continue to ask myself, okay, now where am I in my relationship with her? Because it is active. So, listeners, if part of this story or Dr. Ignacio's story has sparked you to think about relationships, friendships, or otherwise non-romantic relationships that you're in, that may bear some similarities, just know that like it can be a question that you're constantly asking yourself. Okay. So, and I say that only just because I ask this question of my mom a lot. The very quote easy or like knee-jerk reaction is, I really just want my mom to be happy. And for somebody who's lived 70 plus years, and she has 4 grandchildren now, and I just want for her to have all of the joy that can come with life at that point in someone's journey, where they're surrounded by friends and family and loved ones and little loved ones, and everything that can come with that. And I want that for her. I hear so often how unhappy she is. I hear so often kind of her mental state or her physical state or her emotional state. And I just am constantly reminded about how unhappy she is, which is where I struggle, because then I want to be like solution oriented. Okay, let's jump in and let's figure that out. But to your point, and it's such a great question, ultimately, I can't change her diet for her. I can't make her take her medication. So that solution oriented part of me is not going to make that choice. That's just not how I'm going to engage with her. So in that sense, my choices are around when I'm with her, I'm going to engage in a way that might bring about that happiness. Maybe I'll tell jokes or tell stories or just have a real conversation that in that moment, and I'm not saying toxic positivity, like everything has to be up, but if my goal for her, or what I want for her is truly just to be happy, then I can participate in that in a loving, authentic way that it still has choices that make sure that I am not overextending myself at a point that now I'm compromising who I am and the way that I love and how I be. So it is now a mental shift where, okay, when I'm visiting them or when I call them or when her birthday's coming up or whatever, how can I engage in a way that feels, authentic to my hope that she is happy? And then I make choices from that center. Those are the choices that I make. That is ultimately what I want for her. I don't want to be, the parenting child, right? That's telling his mom how to act. I also recognize that there were times that I was doing that for sure. I didn't like myself in that place. So clearly I was behaving in a way that didn't feel like truly me also. So why was I doing that to myself,
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah. But I will also say, to what I was saying earlier, I have also been open to the fact that that response has changed. The choice that what I want for her and what I want for our relationship has changed. And who knows, maybe 6 months from now, it'll change again. But I'm constantly having that check-in with myself to say, like, how am I going to engage with her? How am I going to show her that I love her? What do I want for her and for us right now? And does
What
it
do you
feel
want for
different?
you though,
Mhm.
Zachary? What do you want for you? What do you want? A harmonious relationship? Do you want to not feel heavy? Do you want to not feel frustrated? Do you want to not feel like
Yes.
you've been banging your head?
Yes.
And so when like we said in previous episodes too, when you know what you don't want, you know what you do want. So
That's
it
true.
helps clarify that, right? Okay, so you don't
Yes.
want to do that. And this is another thing, when you do that, right, it keeps yanking your chain, right?
Mhm.
Well, don't put the chain out anymore for your own sake, right? And that's
Yeah.
what I mean by it. It's so important in the simply enough and coming back to yourself and how you can show up to others as your best and favorite self. Well, that's self-checking. What is it that I want?
Mhm.
And ultimately, of course, you want your mom healthy. And of course, you want your mom not in pain anymore. But ultimately, what do you want? You would like that's bonus if she was
Mhm.
pain-free and healthy and that you could have this exercise together and you could talk diet plan together, like that's bonus. But strip it all down, and ultimately what you want is you want a harmonious relationship that can build towards actual feeling loving relationship. And you don't want to be banging your head and feel frustrated and feel unheard and feel that kind of thing. Well, I think you know how to go
Yeah.
about doing that.
Yeah.
And then it becomes more motivating for you because you recognize this is what I want. I
Mhm.
want harmony more than I have to be right and more than I have to fix her, right? I want harmony and I don't want to keep banging my head against the wall.
Yep.
Oh, so if that's what I want for me, then it's easier to be, it's not like you're acquiescing to her demands and what
Yes.
does she want and how does she
Yes.
want me to show up. It becomes about what you want, and you recognize I ain't going to stick my chain out anymore for it to be yanked. I'm
Yeah.
not going to bang my head against the wall because I'm going to move this wall, but it's because of what I want. I want a harmonious relationship, and therefore it makes it easier because that way you have become sick and tired of being sick and tired of banging your head against the wall. So that's how you adjust the approach.
Mhm. Thank you. I said it earlier, listeners. Thank you for going on this journey with us today, and thank you for letting me really in real time talk out loud with Dr. Ignacio, with you and listeners, you being a part of this. I imagine there's something relatable in this story for many of you listening, relationships that you two have engaged with, and ways in which you show up and show love for others. And then also what you just said, Dr. Ignacio, that really helps is also showing up and showing love for oneself. And your girlfriends did that for you while also showing themselves love. I can see that now in, in my story with my mom, that prioritizing or elevating my own want of harmony is not a loss of something else. It's actually the gain of a truer love and appreciation for me and what I need and what I want. And that can still be an act of love for her.
If you love yourself, then you have love to give.
Yep.
You
Yep.
can't give something you don't have, so you have to love yourself
Yeah.
in order to give love. The other thing that I also want to say, so like this is an entire episode itself, or it can be, which is love doesn't always mean yes.
Mhm.
You can say, if something is being asked of you, yes, I love you, and no, I'm not going to give you that.
Mhm.
Yes doesn't equate love all the time.
Mhm.
So they're not mutually exclusive. If I asked you, Zachary, can you empty out your bank account for me right now? As a show of love, that's, first of all, that's not loving of me to ask of
Yep.
you. That's a test. But second of all, you can say, yes, Elizabeth, I love you, and no, I'm not going to give you everything in my bank account.
Yep. That kind of emotional gaslighting for sure. We've all, if you love me, then you'll blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
as if it's conditional.
That
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Love is messy. So people think that, and especially because when the word love is used, it's so often, alluding to romantic love. And then when we talk about the romantic love, then we're talking the rom-coms and the fairy tales. Love is messy, and love is a continuum, and love is, has its ups and downs, and it's not always a yes, nor is it always rainbows and unicorns. But because actually love can be messy, and love can, isn't uniform. I'm sure, I have no doubt in my mind that, my kids love me, but I also have no doubt in my mind that there are moments that they hate me and like wish they had another mom. Like, it's a continuum, it's a spectrum, but where the real love is the discernment of choosing whether or not to continue to love that person. That's where the love is. And guess what? Sometimes the answer is, no, I choose not to love that person anymore because I love myself more. That is also an act of love. That is where, to your point, that love is an action. That is where the choice before the action is really the measure of love. It all starts with us, everybody. Like we talked about, you can't give what you don't have. So love yourself, and that's how you can give away love.
And remember that in loving yourself, you are not just simply enough,
You are more than enough.
just as you are.
Period.
Period. Mwah.
Love you.
Love you.